Hi guys, it's Candace from Beacon Help Books. I wanted to give you guys a quick update of how I've been reading. I figured I'd do a little middle of the month check-in. The first book that I read, finished this month, was The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. And it's funny how books come in waves through BookTube, and I happened to be doing a buddy read with Jess at Garden Scriptorium, Dee at Books and Quirks, and Cheryl at CR Flames Fan. What I noticed, a few other people happened to be reading it at the same time, and it was just curious because we did it because Jess had picked it up in a haul and we wanted to get through it, and I'm glad that we did. It is a large book, and I think you probably have heard a lot about this book on BookTube recently and in general because it did win the Man Booker Prize, but it's a historical fiction based in New Zealand during the Gold Rush, and it follows a cast of characters in a interesting fashion. I will say almost backwards linearly, but it skips around a bunch, and it talks about the greed of humans and having to do a little bit with different races at that time, but mostly it was a character-driven book, and I'm glad I read it. Even though I think I would get a lot out of it if I read it again, I don't think I'll be reading it again. In fact, I'm going to probably unhaul this very shortly. So, so I think I ended up giving this book maybe a 4. I think I rounded up on Goodreads from a 3.5. So that's what I thought about this book. The next book I read was The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, and this was translated from a professor from Middlebury College in Vermont, Stephen Snyder. I really, really enjoyed this book. This was the Read Around the World book club pick for this month. And it's funny because besides the cover at first, I wasn't really wanting to pick it up because it had to do with memory loss. The professor gets in an accident and he can't remember after 80 minutes. It kind of feels like me. I'm like, how long was it that he remembered? I can't even remember. But this book, it's primarily based on 3 characters, and we never really get their full name. It's the professor, the housekeeper, and her son, who the professor names Root. And it's kind of his story of life through his eyes and all of the ways that math is intertwined in life. And this kind of things that he teaches the housekeeper and her son, and they become a little unit. And it's so cool to see. They all scratch an itch that each other needed. And particularly, it's so interesting to see how they work with the professor and his memory deficiency. He tries to put all these little notes on himself to remember things and to remind himself after his time limit has expired if something has, he's already found something, or, he knew this person before, and the housekeeper tries to do things in that certain amount of time interval so she doesn't have to keep reintroducing herself and going through that process of him kind of getting comfortable with her again. But I really enjoyed the book. It was a very easy read. It did touch on also some baseball, which I think had to do more with, because of the stats in that sport, maybe more than others. But I ended up giving this book 4 stars. And the next book I finished was Golden Hill by Frances Spufford. I did this as the buddy read with Cheryl from CR Flames Fan, and we both were very eager to get to this. This was one of my most anticipated reads this month. In fact, 2 of this books I'm going to show you this month I read, and they were my most anticipated reads, and it's interesting to see what I thought about them. This book was on a lot of the booktube channels that I follow and on Goodreads, a lot of people rated this book 5 stars, and it sounded right up my alley. It's a historical fiction based in New York City. It's about this guy, his name is Richard Smith, or Mr. Smith, and he shows up on a ship from England with a note where he should get like £1,000 or something, which is a huge amount of cash in that time, and kind of what spawns from there. They have to figure out if that note is actually real and should be given to him or not. And in that time, it was just a small little place, Manhattan Island in 1746, which is funny to think about. How everybody interacted with him, the loan officers and their families, the government and their families. It's kind of interesting, and I don't want to give away too much because I did not know where this book was going when I read it. People did a good job of not spoiling it for me, but Cheryl and I were very, very confused, I have to say. We were reading it, and after each little section, we were like, maybe we're missing something. I mean, it's enjoyable, but it wasn't, maybe our expectations was too high. And I find it really hard that this book, the best part I thought was the ending. I think towards 3/4 of the way it was kind of a lull. I didn't like when Mr. Smith's in the play or in the jail. But at the end, I hate giving a book a better rating just because of the ending, because most of your time was engaged with the book when it wasn't as that rating. But I did end up giving this a 3, I think, on Goodreads. And I'm glad I read it with Cheryl because we both kind of felt the same way. We really weren't sure where it was going until the end, and maybe that's part of the mystery of it. And I like mysteries, but it was just that I wanted a little bit more from the author to kind of try and understand what was happening. I have been thinking about this more and actually read part of this when I was in New York City. So I did like the historic parts of New York City and the descriptions. At some point, I thought it was maybe going to be a little bit like Gangs of New York because there's a butcher that's kind of a bully. So there was a lot of things that I did enjoy about it, but overall the story was, we were feeling like we felt a little lost with it. So that's my thoughts about Golden Hill. And then I just finished last night Prince Charles, The Passions and Paradoxes of an Improbable Life by Sally Bedell Smith. And this was like a 630-page novel about Prince Charles. And being from the U.S., I don't know hardly anything about Prince Charles. I do know I love British royalty, especially history, so I was intrigued to read this book, and this was another one of the books that I couldn't wait to get to this year. And I think that, especially just recently, there's been a bunch of videos about Diana. So when I was in New York City with my friend, she started bringing up the recent TV show that came on about Diana, and it was interesting to actually be in that situation and think for the first time there's another side to this story. I'm not saying I'm on one side or another side, but just to hear the other side of the story and to get to know Charles as a man. And it follows him from the time he's an infant until present time. And then at the end, there's some pictures that they put to the quotes of some of the books in the book, which I thought was really nice. I like at the beginning of each chapter, there's also pictures. So I enjoyed getting to know him, especially his background, and it kind of explains a little bit why he is the way he is. And I definitely loved learning about all of his charities and things that are important to him, like environmentalism, and he's really into architecture and keeping things more traditional, and he was big into alternative ways of medicine and healing. I did not enjoy some of the parts about fundraising. There was a lot of that, but it's necessary in his job. And to get to know the people that he is definitely intertwined with, a lot of them famous and rich. And the differences between him and his kids and how he's raised his kids, and the way his father was to him versus how he is to his kids, and his kids, how they interact with Camilla. Especially given what happened with Diana, and how they all are dealing with that, and Camilla's rise through the ranks of British royalty. And it touches a lot about Elizabeth, and how Elizabeth is different than Charles, and because Charles is the prince, he can be more open about his feelings and his thoughts, where she isn't that way at all, and how when he does become king, he's supposed to be more like her. Anyways, I find it really, really intriguing. Like I said, I didn't know much about him, and at some point he is going to be, king, most likely. And I just was wondering, for the people that are maybe, have him and his family as the rulers of their country, what their thoughts are on him, because it's such a unique thing coming from the U.S., where we elect our, well, I wouldn't say all of us elect our political candidates. I mean, look what's happening right now. But having this family tied to your politics, and particularly his personality and what you think about him versus, maybe his mom or son, because it was Diana's wish that obviously that William would just be king and not Charles. But anyways, I really enjoyed it. I didn't want to put it down. I think I rounded up from a 3.5 to a 4 for this book as well. So I'm very proud of what I've accomplished so far. I'm trying to get through a few others. The History of Bees, I'm trying to finish, and I'm almost done. And then I had started Rebecca. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to keep up with that or not. I have a few books that came up from the library that I kind of want to read. So I'll just TBD. I might veer from my initial thoughts about what I was going to read this month. So anyways, let me know what your thoughts are, how your reading month has been, if you have any favorite books of the month so far. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.